Hello again, another Agakala reaction. Today we will be watching Europe just announced a crazy $800 billion war plan. War plan? I kind of missed that information, so let's just watch and learn what they're planning. I'm guessing just doing some upgrades to the army, maybe setting up the army.
The United States is no longer the guarantor of European security. Even worse, America now appears to be siding with Russia in negotiations over Ukraine, effectively rewarding Moscow for its invasion. This approach doesn't just legitimize Russia's territorial gains, it allows Russian forces to pause, rearm, and restart the war in just a few years. But it gets worse. The United States is now threatening military force against Greenland and Panama, further alienating its longtime allies. As America drifts further from Europe, Russia sees the perfect opportunity, one it has waited decades for, the chance to finally achieve its 70-year goal and the chief ambition of the Soviet Union, the destruction of NATO. Is it too late for Europe to defend itself? First, let's lay out the threats Europe is currently facing. In its own backyard is the Russian threat, currently contained to fighting inside of Ukraine. It's often been said that the war Europe has always feared is actually being fought by Ukrainians, and it's absolutely true. At the moment, Russian efforts are completely dominated by their fighting in Ukraine and in Ukrainian-held Russian territory. That won't be the case for much longer. Ukraine has managed to hold off the vast Russian army thanks to the unbreakable fighting spirit of its people and a steady influx of superior Western arms and equipment. These advanced weapons have inflicted a disproportionately high toll on Russian forces, weakening their offensive capability.
That was a quick one. Yeah, so far they're just kind of doing like a recap of what's going on there and stuff. So yeah, I did made reaction to video if Europe can have their own army and protect themselves, and it kind of came out that right now Europe can't really do it. Not having like one army, it just basically would have to deal with all of the separate armies of each country of the European Union. So yeah, but like I said there, I think the European Union should really think into it. I did learn something new from that video back then, that basically one of the reasons that why European Union doesn't have a military force of its own, it's because America was against it for all those years. So, and was saying, oh, we're gonna be guaranteed for security and stuff like that. So that's how it is. Okay, this one is longer, so we should go back, and I'll see you in a second to see more of the video. So I'm back, and I just go back to the video as well, and I'll just keep going. I wonder what's the program. I don't know how I missed it. I know there was something big, but currently everything is going
Exact manpower figures remain intentionally undisclosed to deny Russia valuable intelligence, but estimates suggest that Ukraine currently has around 2.2 million military personnel serving in some capacity, whether as full-time active duty troops at the front or in rotating reservist roles. This doesn't bode well for Europe, who only has around 1.5 million total active duty military personnel, and that number is ever shrinking due to military service being seen as unpopular by new generations who have better economic opportunities in the private sector. A Russian victory in Ukraine would not only free up the entire Russian army, but it would immediately make millions of Ukrainians available to Russia as military conscripts. This would bolster the size of Russia's military to overwhelming levels. Already, Russia's forcing 18-year-olds in occupied territories to enlist in the Russian military and fight against their own countrymen under the threat of execution. This is why it's become so critical for Europe to ensure Ukraine comes out on top in any peace negotiations, and that Russia isn't rewarded for launching the war. For Europe, a Ukrainian settlement isn't just diplomacy, it's a matter of national security for the entire continent. It's increasingly likely that Russia will be allowed to keep control over the territories it has occupied. Even more concerning, the White House may pressure Ukraine to surrender additional land, even in regions where Russia doesn't have full control. For example, despite Russia only controlling 60% of the Donetsk Oblast, Ukraine may have to cede the remaining 40% to Russia. This will give Russia control over a third of Ukraine, allowing it to position forces across strategically important corridors for a future invasion. As part of a negotiated deal, all signs indicate the US will support Russian demands to drastically weaken Ukraine's military. This would leave Ukraine with only a fraction of its current strength, rendering it incapable of resisting a future Russian attack. The positioning part of European concerns further extends into the Baltics. With Ukrainian forces weakened, Russia would be free to reposition its combat power, shifting troops and resources back to its borders within the Baltic states. The three states of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania have always been vulnerable to a Russian attack, separated from the rest of NATO and difficult to reinforce. Meanwhile, Russia has made it no secret that it's planned for an invasion of the Baltics in order to split the NATO alliance. Since 2012, one of NATO's chief concerns was that Russia would launch a fait accompli attack on the Baltics. It would force the rest of NATO to commit to a possible nuclear war over 3 nations it cannot defend at the start of hostilities. A failure by NATO to defend the Baltics would essentially lead to the collapse of the alliance. Having been tested in fire and proven to be worthless, the Baltics would then fall prey to Russia, which would open up the Nordic countries to further Russian expansion. Poland then would also be on the Russian anvil, with extremely indefensible terrain due to its position on the European plain. And Russia isn't Europe's only threat, because now there's a new threat on the horizon: America. President Trump threatened the use of military force to seize Greenland, a sovereign territory of Denmark. He not only refused to back down on these threats, but he went on to state at his State of the Union address in early March 2025 that, quote, all options were on the table, but the US would have Greenland one way or another. In response to his remarks, France has mulled sending European troops to Greenland in order to deter American forces. This is despite needing manpower on the continent to continue deterring Russia in both Ukraine and the Baltics. Making matters worse is escalating tensions between the United States and Canada, whom President Trump has insisted numerous times should become America's 51st state. For Canada, the joke is worn extremely thin, and now the two nations are in the midst of a disastrous trade war. For Europeans wary of an America looking to expand its territory by force, there's a real concern that US forces will be ordered to move on Canada, a NATO ally and a partner to Europe. Again, talk of a European deterrence force in Canada has been floated by some European leaders. At the moment, Europe is caught between a rock and a hard place. On the one side is Russia, its decades-long rival. On the other is its former strongest ally and supporter, the United States. As the question of European security becomes the most important political issue on the continent, many are wondering if it's even realistic for Europe to defend itself, or if it's too late. In response to increased security concerns, the European Commission has proposed a massive $150 billion defense fund, around $162 billion. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen declared that Europe has officially entered an era of rearmament. It's a shift reminiscent of the pre-World War II age of imperialism, when the developed world was regularly consumed by conflict. One of the greatest achievements of NATO and the post-World War II US-led rules-based global order was ending the cycle of perpetual great power wars. But now the US itself has dismantled this era of peace. Europe's now scrambling to defend itself, not only against its current adversaries, but also against the growing possibility that a former ally could become an enemy. The 5-point plan is named Rearm Europe, and while currently earmarked at $162 billion in spending, up to $841 billion in total could be raised if need be. This is Europe's superpower, its vast wealth. Europe beats Russia in terms of GDP, but Europe's big weakness is that though it has a lot of cash, it doesn't have a lot of places to spend that cash. At the end of the Cold War, Europe's defense industry stagnated. Unlike the United States, who consolidated 51 major contractors into 5, Europe allowed its defense industry to become fragmented. Concerns over national sovereignty and the economic value to nations of defense contractors led to a disjointed European industry that still struggles to cooperate on major weapons programs. To this day, Europe continues to face these challenges with the production of military equipment across the entire EU. This has resulted in a huge dependency on US defense contractors. Historically, these contractors could be relied upon as allies, but increasingly Europe seeks to diverge from the United States in order to maintain the integrity of its warfighting capabilities. What Europe fears most is relying on the US for upgrades to the F-35, only to have those and even spare parts abruptly canceled. For the US, this means the loss of access to a defense sector worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Despite a massive boost in defense spending and emergency grants from the European Commission, Europe's biggest problem is its inability to consolidate its industrial base. Member states have raised concerns over autonomy, fearing that the integration of defense sectors would reduce national sovereignty over defense companies. Further, many nations like Germany and France are reluctant to give up their industrial advantages in favor of solutions that would see the industry spread around to other member states in order to ease logistics. This has actively prevented the establishment of economies of scale, which would reduce the cost of military equipment for all member states. Furthermore, the lack of integration and expansion within the European defense industry has severely limited its capabilities. With most nations keeping their military production separate, only a handful of European defense companies are large enough to invest in cutting-edge next-generation research and development programs. This limits Europe's ability to remain competitive against its competitors in the United States, China, and even Russia to an extent. Between mid-2022 and mid-2023, Europe relied on the United States for most of its military purchases, with 63% of defense spending going to American companies. 15% went to foreign companies in Israel and South Korea, and the rest was spent inside of Europe. Europe's second biggest problem is that European elites often have closer relationships with U.S. leaders than with each other. This facilitates U.S. arms deals, and the U.S. government itself makes it easy to do business with U.S. manufacturers. The American government handles most of the administrative work in an arms deal, easing the sale and transfer of weapons. Then there's the perceived quality advantage of U.S. weapons. In some cases, like the F-35, this reputation is well deserved. However, when it comes to air-to-air missiles or anti-tank weapons, Europe produces systems just as good, if not better. Yet, due to all the reasons we listed before, European buyers are unaware of this fact or simply find it easier to continue buying American arms. Things may be slowly changing, though. In 2023, Europe announced the European Defense Industry Reinforcement Through Common Procurement Act. It was meant to strengthen the European defense industry and lower traditional barriers to cooperation via joint acquisition of weapons. A flagship of the agreement was the Mistral 3 air defense missile produced by French company MBDA. 9 European countries are involved in the joint purchase: France, Belgium, Cyprus, Estonia, Hungary, Romania, Spain, Slovenia, and Denmark. The goal is to expand this model to other weapon systems, investing in European defense and lowering barriers to expanding defense manufacturing capability across the continent. As it stands, though, a key weakness for European defense is there are simply not enough factories for all the money waiting to be spent. This is a global phenomenon.
To spend some money to build those factories,
defense contractors are being caught by surprise by the voracious appetite for ammunition, missiles, and armored vehicles that...
Well, that's what it is, isn't it? There is not going to be anything else about it. Whoa. 5 minutes, wow. I don't think the video is even, what, it's like 15 minutes long, so that 1/3 of that? Okay. So basically, yeah, like, I know that you can't be... This is what the problem is, isn't it? Trump is putting all of those tariffs in, and basically he says he wants to bring the production and stuff back into America, but that doesn't work like that, because you can't do everything overnight. You need the factories that they are non-existent in America. That's what he wants to do. He wants to bring that production back to America, but there is no factories and there's no people to work them. And the same problem have Europe now with military spendings and stuff, because we have no factories to produce any war machines or war ammunition and things like that, apparently. So yeah, so basically next 2 years gonna be working on the fact that we have to build those companies in somewhere in Europe, factories that basically gonna do in that, and invest in like research and stuff to build our own weapons, isn't it? But now the question is, well, how long that's gonna take, and what's gonna happen in the meantime with Ukraine, isn't it? Malay. So yeah, this ad is very long, so I'll see you in a second. Okay, I'm back. So let's just go back to the video as well and keep watching. Yeah, 14, not even 15 minutes, and the ad was more than 5 minutes long.
That a modern war raging in Ukraine demanded. As it stands, even U.S. firms have a backlog, sometimes years long, of key defense equipment such as Patriot air defense systems. Germany's Rheinmetall and other companies are looking to the civilian sector as a way of expanding production. As defense spending grows across the entire continent, these companies are looking to expand their own ability to produce equipment through already existing means. During World War II, the United States rapidly converted its automobile factories into production lines for tanks, airplanes, and other military equipment. Today, Europe is looking to replicate that success story. At the moment, Europe's car industry is experiencing a slowdown due to less demand for traditional vehicles and a shift to electronic vehicles. This has prompted layoffs all across the continent, with the shuttering of many automotive plants. However, Rheinmetall has announced that it's repurposing 2 factories making car parts to produce defense equipment. Meanwhile, Hensoldt, manufacturer of the TRML-4D radar system, is looking to bring on 200 former auto workers. This is expected to double the company's production of radars up to as many as 30 a year.
Good.
And then there's the nuclear option, the ultimate guarantor of European peace and the biggest shakeup in global geopolitics since World War II. Since the end of the Second World War and the start of the atomic age, the United States of America has extended a nuclear umbrella to all of Europe. This security agreement ensured that the United States would treat a nuclear attack on any European nation under its umbrella as if it were a nuclear attack on the US itself. It was not only an incredible display of American friendship and support for Europe, but it also meant to prevent European powers from needing to develop their own nuclear weapons. It prevented proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, a win for humanity at large.
Guess what?
Yet increasingly, Europe is no longer capable of relying on American promises of security.
Where's my thing?
Iran's supreme leader
But it didn't, because there are countries in Europe that they have nuclear weapons.
himself said it best in a message posted to his official X account. Ukraine shows that American promises are worthless. The world has taken note, especially Europe, which is now discussing the possibility of expanding nuclear proliferation for the first time. Some have floated the idea of European nations providing Ukraine with nuclear weapons so it can ensure its own
No, that'd be
security,
too much, I
in the
think,
way
but-
Israel was given nuclear weapons by the United States. For the rest of Europe, though, France is
sorry.
currently in talks over
Wait, what now? Alright, so I have 2 minutes left. So I'm gonna watch this and I'm gonna look into that because I thought that Israel just had their own weapons.
expanding the role of its own nuclear arsenal in protecting European countries. Emmanuel Macron is currently in talks and is signaling an openness to creating a French nuclear umbrella to replace the American one. However, some nations are growing increasingly wary of international agreements, even intra-European ones, as America's failed promises in Ukraine and its new hostility toward Europe cast doubt on the reliability of alliances. This is the true legacy of the new United States, the erosion of the rules-based world order, and a deepening distrust in the international agreements. Some in Germany and other European nations have considered the development of their own nuclear arsenals, with the US abandoning Ukraine and uncertainty surrounding France or any other European nuclear guarantor. Many fear that any security commitment can be broken when it's no longer convenient. Europe has the financial resources to deter future Russian or even American aggression, but it lacks the industrial capacity to produce the military equipment needed to defend itself effectively. This leaves the entire continent in a fragile position, especially if Russia is rewarded for its actions in Ukraine, emerging emboldened and militarily stronger for a future conflict. At the same time, the United States is shifting from Europe's closest ally to a potential threat, forcing European nations to reassess their security strategy in an increasingly unstable world. The post-World War II rules-based world order that has seen the longest stretch of peace between major powers in all human history is officially over. We are now in the age of rearmament. Is Europe moving fast enough to build a military force capable of defending itself? Or is it already too late? Should European nations develop their own nuclear deterrent? Or will alliances like NATO still hold? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Now go check out America's military plan to destroy cartel terrorists.
I don't think that's gonna work, the NATO. America will probably pull out from it eventually. And eventually, as in soon. But I'm kinda curious about why do Israel have nuclear weapons? Israel's nuclear program, while not officially confirmed, is widely believed to be driven by a combination of deterrence, regional instability, and a perceived need for self-preservation in a hostile environment. Okay. Israel is widely believed to possess nuclear weapons. Estimates of Israel's stockpile range between 90 and 400 nuclear warheads, and the country is believed to possess a nuclear triad of delivery options. By F-15s, F-16 fighters, by Dolphin-class submarine-launched cruise missiles, and by the Jericho series of intermediate to intercontinental range ballistic missiles. Its first deliverable nuclear weapon is thought to have been completed in late 1966 or early 1967, which would make it the 6th country in the world to have developed item. But this doesn't say anything about American giving. Why are they saying that America gave it to them? Did USA give nuclear weapons to Israel? Israel. No. That changed my question. Did 2. Okay. Well, there's no public confirmation that the AI overview again. Confirmation that the US directly provided nuclear weapons to Israel. The US has long been aware of Israel's nuclear program and has in effect tacitly accepted it according to multiple sources. So there's no confirmation to it, although it's kind of believable. Yeah, sorry, I was reading some of the comments there. And, yeah, what do you think about it? I think, obviously, yeah, I was just thinking that basically Europe it's possible to do it, but it needs time for it. There's money in it, but there's need of time as well to build all stuff. So I guess another few years, hopefully. I think that even if in 4 years' time, or even 2 years' time, because America had the midterm elections as well, and that might change the whole power thing, how it is in America. So it could be that in that few years' time, everything changed again. They're gonna flip again. But I think Europe still should be. That's probably gonna teach Europe lesson like us. That we have to kind of start relying on ourselves on that. So yeah, that's my take on it. We'll see what's gonna happen with time. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I see you tomorrow. Bye.